For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. Hi, I'm Surya Gangadharan, and this evening on the Gist we are looking at the war in Ukraine. It's nearly 10 months now and there is no decisive outcome that seems possible or even probable. I have with me General Subrata Saha, former Deputy Chief of Army Staff, former DGMO, former member of the National Security Advisory Board, to give us some idea as to where this war is going and what are the lessons for India. So welcome, glad to have you.
Thank you.
So where do you see this war going? You don't see an outcome, a decisive outcome?
Well, I don't think we are seeing anything decisive just as yet. Outcome, time will tell. And at this point in time, we have seen almost 10 months, we are getting close to 10 months since the war started. So if you go back and see the aims with which everything happened. If, for example, Russia, when they came into Ukraine, they came with the expressed intention of, saving or protecting their people who are suffering from genocide. Okay, and then they wanted to make sure that the NATO does not creep forward. And finally, a little later got added that Ukraine must remain neutral. So if these three were the aims of the Russians, what was the aim of the West or the United States? They came in with a proclaimed aim of protecting the Charter of the United Nations, protecting democracy, and somewhere down the line, maybe 6-7 months, in some of their writings that emerged with quoting sources, etc., is to try and weaken Russia for a long term. So if you look at these aims, really speaking, can they actually have any decisive outcome? In the case of Russia, at some stage, actually they did achieve, between what they had secured in 2014 and the capture of that city of Mariupol, the port city of Mariupol, the land corridor that they were able to get between Crimea and the Russian border. To a large extent, their first aim was achieved. Okay, and I think Ukraine had also stated that they are quite okay not to be in the NATO, although they were asking for it earlier, but at some stage they were saying that. Now all of that seems to have gone past, and now it has become more like a test of resilience, of more than anything else, the people of Ukraine. In many ways, this is a very strange situation where a declined power trying to recover something is fighting a declining power. And the pawn in between or the proxy in between is Ukraine. So in a scenario like this, and there is yet another power which seems to be watching from the sidelines and rising and who seems to benefit either way. So, and that is one dimension. The other dimension is, if you see, I think almost $15 billion is the kind of money that US has invested. And they have been invested in what? In arms that are being supplied by the arms industry of the US. So there is a huge, eco-military kind of a dynamic which is at play, and this eco-military dynamic does not take into account the economic sanctions whose ability to make any demonstrated effect actually is coming into question, because alternatives are being found, and people who are sanctioning or people who are allies and friends of those who are sanctioning, they themselves seem to be suffering the way they are. The winter period, yes, as I can see it, this is the time we are already seeing some sort of, expressions of wanting to have talks, meet my conditions, we will talk, etc., etc. That is because during the winters, I don't see much action on the ground happening for multiple reasons. One, of course, the cold, the effect that it has on the population as such. If you see, they have already switched the targets to making an impact on the civilians, so on the morale of the civilian, the willpower of the civilians. So quite evidently during winters it is not going to be pushed beyond a point, because there are so many such implications. And if you look at it from a tactical point of view on the ground, it is so easy to pick up targets,
and blast them.
for both sides. So therefore, we will see some, kind of batchit that you can expect in the next 3 to 4 months. And so therefore, outcomes wise, no decisiveness, I don't see anything happening. So it's already prolonged, and it seems it is going to draw out a lot more, because the major players are not very clear on what do they want from this war now.
That's very strange, isn't it? Because this theatre witnessed a lot of maneuver warfare during the Second World War, and more recently the Iraq invasion and the first Gulf War. So I mean, what happened?
What a nice question, Surya. In that famous book called Barbarossa, which had described the German offensive into Russia, and then the Russia's, pushing back the Germans. September 1941 was that Battle of Kiev, and von Rundstedt, one of his commanders was Guderian, by the way. They had done what was the largest encirclement in military history. And in that book, I recollect, it says, once that encirclement was done, it says, and now Kiev would drop like a ripe apple. When you see the way wars are being fought now, actually you wonder where are those maneuvers. And like you said, as a military person, what do you think of it? I think because of this, dominance of firepower, because of these other elements via technology which has come into play. So those brilliance of maneuvers that we used to see, positioning troops, typical things which we would learn from the chess games coming to the battlefields, I think that seems to be giving way to brute force supported by very smart technologies. In this war, we are seeing, this great convergence of space, cyber and electronic warfare. It is making almost any movement absolutely difficult. I'm not for a moment trying to justify those long queues of tanks that we have seen on television channels. No, I'm not at all justifying that. What I'm trying to say, even the kind of maneuvers that you would see from armored formations and all, we are not getting to see them here because I think they are getting vulnerable. So therefore, it is going to have an impact on the way we are going to fight wars in the future, on the way tanks are going to look at protecting themselves. We used to talk about, electronic warfare suites for aircraft. I think we are going to be looking at something similar for tanks, and the whole range of weapon systems is going to undergo a serious change. And now the other point, again from a military point of view, that we are seeing, one thing that seems to be making an impact all the time, adverse impact all the time, is the logistics supply chain. In the beginning of the war, if you see, when Russia had initially probably visualized that they will be able to take Kiev very easily, it is because of the stretch of the supply lines that finally they didn't. And more recently, when they had to pull out of Kherson, it was again because of stretched supply lines, one reason, and of course disruption in the command and control. So we are seeing all these factors which are coming in and having a bearing on the kind of large forces, large maneuvers that we used to see in the conventional wars of the past.
What about the downsizing of forces, whether on the part of Russia, maybe Ukraine also? Is that also a factor in this?
That definitely was a major factor in the very beginning. If you recall, Ukraine had, going by figures which were there in the open sources, Ukraine had about 2 lakhs or so, people in their army, and very soon they realized that this was not enough. So therefore, they had to go in for big time mobilization of their civilians, and today the numbers have touched almost 1 million. And if you see on the Russian side, they are almost mirror imaging what they were. And in September, we are aware of the partial mobilization that President Putin has asked to be done. So therefore, this impact of smaller armies, smaller peacetime armies suddenly having to mobilize and go to war, that is definitely taking a toll. So sometime it was in the discourse that wars are not relevant anymore, conventional wars are not going to be there anymore. I think all that has been challenged, you know, that you'll be able to fight only with drones, which people were imagining after the Armenia-Azerbaijan war. That narrative also has undergone a change. So therefore, it does bring to question, as you said, what is the optimum number of standing armies or standing forces, armed forces that you require to be able to effectively deny whatever threats that the nation faces. And at the same time, we have to see what is the kind of resilience you want to build in to the force in terms of the prolonging wars. I mean, at once upon a time, we used to have, I think, 20 days of intense 20I and 30I and figures like that, which were brought down from 30 to 20 and so on in terms of ammunition and all. All these are issues which will have to be gone into, because if the war is going to prolong, what is the kind of war? Are we expecting it to be intense for prolonged periods? If it is not going to be intense, what will there be more gradations between of intensity that we are going to look at, and how much more nuanced it is going to be? Because if war aims are going to be as complicated as it seems in the instant case, if the war aims are going to keep changing as the situation is evolving, as we are seeing from the instant case, so we have to see how are we going to deal with these wars in the future. And you know, if you were to take a step forward from there, if you were to go into the nuclear domain, for example, well, arguably you can say that when Russia was initially doing that very cliched nuclear saber rattling, when they were doing it, you can say, well, it was not correct, but the fact of the matter is, it did deter, it did get the West to think and take the decision that they don't want to enter the conflict themselves. They are only going to support Ukraine. So much so that they were not even ready to go along with the no-fly zone, which President Zelensky kept asking for. So therefore, whether we agree or we don't agree, so the impact or the deterrence value, it is for us to take a call. What deterrence value does it have? And secondly is the way these long-range missile strikes are happening. I think we have to be very, very concerned on the security of our assets as well, on how do we keep our assets secure,
including cyber.
Of course, cyber is a major one, and assets including nuclear assets.
So we are embarking on reforms, these Agniveer, Agnipat reforms, which would, I think, eventually see some downsizing of the military. So in that sense, do you think the Ukraine war is giving you, I mean, you've already given an indication of that the Ukraine war is giving us food for thought here, that we need to perhaps step back a bit? Or can we still sustain such large numbers?
I think we'll have to see how are we going to optimize. One is the optimizing in terms of the numbers. Two is the optimizing in terms of the training capability. Because when a person has to exit, say after a given number of years, we are losing trained manpower. And in this kind of high-tech war, where we are going to depend so heavily on cyber, so heavily on unmanned systems, if you are going to depend on space systems so much, long-range systems so much, this is very, very high-tech stuff. It requires a lot of high-end training, and it takes one is training to be operators, the other is the training to be able to utilize it to good effect, to understand the entire scenario. So therefore, what is the duration that we are looking at? All of it will have to be, thought through. Of course, applied in our context, as it were, whether it is to do with the northern or the western, or again much cliched two-front and the nexus that we talk about.
So even this issue of reservists, is that something we are looking at?
Well, the whole concept of reservists is undergoing a change because of this Agniveer. So I am not, quite competent to comment on exactly where the thought process is today. But that having been said, if we are optimizing the standing, obviously there will be an element of reservist in the calculus. Okay, and how do you keep the reservists trained? That is yet another challenge. What sort of like we were following the concept of territorial army for very, very long. It is not new to us. But that having been said, for many years, for a long time, of course, the situation has changed recently only. For a long time, most of our territorial army units were embodied for long periods because of the heavy commitment in counterinsurgency, counterterrorism, and so on. And even now, if you see the way our railway lines that are being developed in the northeast and all are being protected by the territorial army personnel, so they are so there are lessons that we'll have to take from our past and apply it into the future. And then that some sort of a good circulation, I think, will have to be worked out between people who are in the regular combat, so to speak, and other security duties, whether security duties are being discharged through other security agencies or whether their services are utilized by industries who are related to security. Somewhere, keeping the mind quite, involved in the same domain is something that we will have to be looking at as we go into the future.
So lots of issues and challenges over there. General Saha, thank you very much for that perspective and insight. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
And for those of you who joined us on this conversation, thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media and Instagram. Thank you and good night.